Hello and welcome to my festive tech calendar contribution. It's 17th of December and I'm glad you tuned in today instead of buying Christmas presents anywhere. There is still time before Christmas and you wouldn't be happy if you missed this today. My name is Thomas Bründel and today I will introduce you to Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc. But first, something about myself. At the moment, I'm working for a leading Austrian cloud service provider as an expert for hybrid cloud and data center. My cloud experience cover Azure and AWS, but my focus is clearly on Azure and of course on the hybrid products available there. You can find my contact informations um, listed here. And if you want to get in contact with me after the workshop, feel free. Well, let's get to the agenda, the objectives of this workshop. First, we want to get an overview of Azure in hybrid and multi-cloud scenarios. And so there is no way around having a look at Azure Arc and Azure Stack HCI. In addition, we want to gather some live demo experience on managing on-premise resources in Azure. And last but not least, the comfort level should be increased when using hybrid Azure services, and the shyness from using them should be taken away. And to enter the topic, let me briefly explain why we need new ways to manage IT infrastructures. If you look at today's environments, you see that the complexity and distribution of infrastructure components have increased massively. On top of this complexity, different development tools, languages, and frameworks are used for application development and operation, as well as approaches as Kubernetes and DevOps. At this point, the following question arises: how to monitor, govern, and secure resources seamlessly, regardless of where they are running, and how to modernize local data centers and legacy applications using new cloud technologies. And that's where Azure Arc comes in. Azure Arcs need to be understood as a central orchestration platform that extends the so-called Azure control plane and brings it to everywhere, which mean and include on-premise locations, edge locations, or public cloud environments. As a result, you gain centralized visibility, security, and governance across resources and locations. Arc also enables the usage of familiar tools like GitHub and other Azure PaaS service into these environments. Building upon the just presented foundation, there are different key features and services that Azure Arc currently offers. These are the Arc-enabled application services, the Arc-enabled data services, and Arc-enabled servers and Kubernetes. And of course, constantly more services and possibilities are added, and existing ones are improved. However, I will go into more details on the next slides. Now the question comes up: which resources can be managed in detail with Azure Arc and which benefits do we get from it? First, there are the Azure Arc enabled servers. This means Windows servers and servers with Linux operating systems such SUSE, Red Hat, which can now be collected and grouped in Azure. Subsequently, they can also be monitored and kept up to date by using Azure Monitor. Policies can be applied via Azure policy, which allows to apply governance and security. On Azure Arc enabled SQL servers, additional benefits can be leveraged besides the previously mentioned ones. For example, it's possible to implement comprehensive monitoring via Azure Security, also known under the new name Microsoft Defender for Cloud. In terms of performance, you get a proactive SQL assessment that ensures an optimal configuration of your databases. And of course, you get access to Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes, but I will go into this in more detail later. At this time, um, I will I want to give you a short demo. So let's jump to a browser and switch to the Azure portal. Next, we look for Azure Arc in the Azure Service pane. If you can find it, you can use the search bar as well. You will then be taken to an overview page where you have three options to continue. First, you can deploy complete testing environments by using the Arc box templates. And there are two flavors available, the full version and one version for IT pros. At the end, you can see the spectrum, you can see the resources involved and you can use to test and inspect. The next option makes it possible to add existing on-premise infrastructure to Azure. As you can see, the spectrum of choices is quite large and includes infrastructure, and it's also includes platform. For infrastructure, you have servers, SQL servers, Kubernetes cluster, and Azure Arc virtual machines. On the platform side, you will find VMware vSphere, System Center, Configuration Manager, and System Center Virtual Machine Manager and Azure Stack HCI. And Azure Stack HCI I will cover in more detail later. Finally, let's take a look at the possibilities of the third options. At this point, I would like to point out that these services are all based on Kubernetes, and therefore the corresponding infrastructure must be provided in advance. There are data services, as you can see here, SQL managed instance, Postgres SQL, and there's also application services. And as you can see, we have web apps available, logic apps, functions, API management, and so on. But I will skip this now because I will cover it later in more detail. Now the question comes up, how we onboard on-prem infrastructure and how this works in detail. I can assure this is not rocket science. The whole process is done by PowerShell, and the necessary scripts are generated in advanced in the portal and then are executed on the corresponding resources. I will show you this now. So I will go to servers here in the Azure Arc portal and click on add. Then I have the possibility to select one deployment method. I want to deploy a single server now, and you have a button here, generate script. Click on it. Then you have to make some configurations. So you find a subscription, a resource group, a region, which operating system you are using, how you want to connect your agent. I will skip the text now, and there we have the generated script, and we are able to download or to copy it to the clipboard. And with the script executed on the necessary resource virtual machine, it will be onboarded to Azure, and this will look like this. I have prepared one VM here with the name VM SQL Arc, and you are now taken to an overview page where you have some general facts about this machine. The interesting part starts under settings. If you have SSH and an SSH client active on Windows, and as well for Linux, it works as well. You can connect directly over the browser in a SSH session to this machine. I have also installed Windows Admin Center on this machine. So Windows Admin Center is the replacement for the server management manager, and so you are able to administrate the VM as you would on-prem. As you can see, you have all the options you are used to within the server manager, and it's also constantly new features are added here. Let's switch back. We have also the possibility to onboard an Arc-enabled server to Windows Defender for Cloud, formerly called Azure Security Center. And Windows Defender for Cloud is a cloud posture management system. So in other words, you will gain advices in the context of the policy initiative. A policy initiative is a set of policies, um, and the Windows Defender for Cloud assess if you are compliant with these policies. And you also get recommendations of what you have to fix to get compliant if there are problems with that. Under extensions, you see which add-ons are installed at the moment. I have installed a lot of extensions for this demo, and you are able to do this over the add button here. And as you can see, there are a lot of possibilities here. For example, you can install the custom script extension, and with this you are able to execute PowerShell scripts from the Azure portal on the on-prem machine. Then, as I have already explained, you are able to assign policies. There is a standard policy available, the Azure Security Center benchmark. It's a good starting point if you want to have, if you want to make your first steps in a more secure environment. As you can see, the policy is not compliant at the moment, I have also installed a single policy, and this policy makes that the Arc enabled SQL Server extension is installed. Then we have auto manage. It's a complete automatic best practice management solution. So if you choose from different profiles, and then your VM is set up in a way that Microsoft defined. It's good for a production environment. You also have updates management. That's one of my favorite features. So you can check for updates, then an assessment is triggered instantly. It's running now. At the moment, you see there are 4 updates available for this VM, and you can also schedule updates. That means the whole update procedure is manageable over the admin portal. Then we have inventory as well. So you can see which software is installed here, which services are running, and if you have set up it correctly, you um, uh, can observe a folder for changes or the Windows registry for changes. And this leads me to the change tracking point. With change tracking, you see which services, for example, have switched to a different state in the last time, or which files have been modified, and so on. Under monitoring, you find the insight. Um, this is very cool because if you switch to performance, you will get a real deep insight of your performance parameters. And on this collection, you can also set up Azure alert rules if you want to be notified in case of, for example, the utilization of your CPU is going over 80%. And also a nice feature is the map feature. So you will get a picture which connection your machine is establishing, and which clients, for example, is using your machine. Under logs, you are able to run KQL queries, and I have prepared one. This KQL is looking for the last heartbeat over the Azure monitoring agent. This is the the agent that makes it possible to gather the health informations for this VM. And if you want to know if the connection is available, you can run this KQL queries. KQL is something like SQL for Azure and this log analytics workspace here. Okay. Now one more feature I want to show you. I have also prepared an SQL server, and this is the same procedure. You have to create a PowerShell script, and with this PowerShell script, you are onboarding your SQL server to Azure. And then there are some possibilities you gain from this. Um, for example, you get an overview about the the environment and get some hard facts. You can see this under the property pane here, the collation, for example, the version of the server, the edition, which patch level, and so on. You can also see which databases are involved here at the moment. And my favorite feature is the environment health. This is the assessment I have mentioned in the theory part. And I think this is a killer feature because you get a free assessment with recommendations. And that's something you have to pay a lot of money normally. For example, if you enter such a recommendation, you will see also how to fix this. Okay, I will now go back to the presentation. Let's take a look at the benefits of using Kubernetes with Azure Arc to manage modern cloud native applications. You get a platform where you can centrally roll out your applications everywhere, since all resources are gathered in Azure Arc. You can use familiar tools like GitHub and Azure DevOps and connect them to your Azure Arc environment and don't have to learn new tools. As before, with Azure Arc enabled servers, you get a platform that monitors the security of your Kubernetes environment, which brings us back to Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Which cloud services are now subsequently obtainable with Kubernetes at each site? First, we have the data services. Right now, we have two database offerings supporting PostgreSQL and MS SQL. More services are planned here. The big advantage of getting databases as a service is that it is always up to date and we don't have to manage them out ourselves. Then we have application services consisting of the Azure App Service to host web apps, the Azure Functions to execute code in a serverless way, and Logic App, a low-code platform to create, for example, automated procedures. All these services can be obtained with Kubernetes at any location as a PaaS service. Now that we have a rough overview of Azure Arc and what we can do with it, I would like to introduce you the hardware designed especially for it. This comes in the form of the Azure Stack family, which I would like to outline briefly. Here we have the Azure Stack Edge, the Azure Stack HCI, and the Azure Stack Hub. For each member in the family, there is also an individual use case available. The Azure Stack Edge is for scenarios where on-site computing power is needed, but data center hardware wouldn't pay off. The Azure Stack HCI, on the other hand, is ideal if you have a data center and need to modernize it. Both solutions require a connection to the internet and to Azure. So we have so-called connected scenarios here. The Azure Stack Hub, on the other hand, is for disconnected scenarios where large computing power is needed. A use case, for example, could be on an aircraft carrier in Formula One racing, where you always have your own cloud with you and may not always be connected to the internet. However, we will focus on Azure Stack HCI in the following. Before we take a closer look at Azure Stack HCI, we first need to understand what HCI or hyperconverged means. The easiest way to explain is this with a simple figure. On the left side, we have a classic three-tier infrastructure consisting of components listed here. For example, the hypervisors, the storage, network appliances, MISC appliances like phone call systems. And on the right side, we have the hyper-converged version. The difference now is that in hyper-converged infrastructures, all components have been pulled together as far as possible, and everything can be managed via a single platform. At this moment, it is already clear that this have great advantages like less space requirements, less power consumption, and less personnel, and so on. What do we find now under the hood of Azure Stack HCI? The following illustration must be read from bottom to top, and we start therefore with the hardware. Consequently, only verified hardware from OEM partner like HP, Dell, or similar is used. Indeed, from a hardware perspective, the entire solution can come from a single partner and is then labeled as an integrated system. This has the advantage that you can get the stack fully functional up to the operating system level and only have to connect it to Azure. Of course, this implies that the hardware has to be both completely new and that old hardware is not reused. The next component is the operating system called Azure Stack HCI OS. Basically, Windows Server Core was taken. All unnecessary technologies and components were removed, and three technologies were provided in an improved way. These technologies are storage space direct to provide software defined storage, Hyper-V as a virtualization technology to provide compute resources, and SDN, software defined network, to be able to handle the network layer in an abstracted way. Based on this, you can now deploy traditional workloads in the form of VMs, and of course, you can also use modern workloads like Kubernetes, explicitly AKS. The stack is managed either on premise via the Windows Admin Center I have already introduced in the demo, or directly from Azure. And last but not least, several Azure services can be now connected in a simplified way, such as Azure Arc itself, Azure Backup, Azure Monitoring, Azure Site Recovery, and many more. Here, once again, summarized what you can now achieve with all the presented stuff and how they work together. We have Azure Arc to manage and run cloud native apps and Azure services, and the modern hardware in form of Azure Stack HCI to bring the cloud to your on-prem location. It's worth mentioning that with this solution, Microsoft is the only provider that delivers a complete story across all these layers, including infrastructure, the management interface, and the service that can be leveraged, and this across all sites. Now it's time for a second demo. So let's get back to the Azure portal and the Azure Arc management interface. We are now interested to see what the point Azure Stack HCI is all about. As you can see, I have a cluster based on HPE's hardware. It's a single node cluster, but that shouldn't be that should be sufficient for our purpose here at the moment. Okay, I see I'm in the wrong window. Sorry. I will fix this. So now we have the right window. Sorry for that. So we are looking for Azure Stack HCI in the Azure Arc portal. And you can see now the single node cluster I've told you before from the manufacturer HPE. It's in a connected status, and it's in detail, it's a Proliant DL380 generation 10. And now you are taken to an overview page, and you are able to see, for example, over the inside in with health page state your server is. You get all the performance informations you need. You see which virtual machines are running here. At the moment, I have 3 running. You also can see which uh, what the health status is for your storage you have provided on your Azure Stack HCI. And as I have already mentioned, this is the Azure part. You have to manage your Azure Stack HCI over the Windows Admin Center. And I will switch to this now. I have 3 components here. I have my single node, a gateway server where I have hosted the Windows Admin Center, and I have a cluster resource here. And the cluster resource is the place where we want to go now. From this, we are able to manage our Azure Stack HCI. Again, we get a overview page about the health status of the environment. We see that it's connected to Azure Arc. It's also registered to Azure. That means that information about, for example, licensing will be transferred, but you don't have to be worried about data privacy. Only the informations about, for example, cost management and monitoring, if you want monitoring, are transferred to the cloud. We have as you have the possibility to manage um, everything like you are used to with the Hyper-V manager. You are also able to manage your environment with classic tools like Hyper-V Manager or Server Cluster Manager. Um, there is no right and no wrong here. And as you can see, we have 3 VMs are running here, and we are able to create a new VM as well. We have also the possibility to create Azure Kubernetes service. And as I have already told, this is the foundation for the application service you are able to run on Azure Stack HCI as well. Yes, we have also the Azure Monitor, and this will brings you to a status page where you can see um, if your system is connected and if there are problems with the, okay, that's weird. It's working and the status is not okay here. Something to fix later. Sorry for that. Okay. This was the presentation from my side. So I hope you have found something interesting. If you have further questions, please feel free to contact me. You will find my contact information listed here once again. I will answer your question as far and as fast as possible. Thank you for your time and goodbye.